All right, back on LinkedIn with Steve Siegal. Steve, we've talked a lot about your transition from government investigator or prosecutor's office investigator to private sector, working insurance, working your way up into the role you have now. But there's something else that you're passionate about, and we teased it in the last episode, but it's career transition for our law enforcement partners as well. And so let's talk about that a little bit. You have high caliber career transitions, your company. You're wearing the shirt with the brand on it. I love it. And yeah. So tell us a little bit, how did that start? Why is this something that's important to you?
Well, thank you, Scott. It is very important to me. I'm very passionate about it. And it didn't start with that prospect of having a business. It started with the prospect of helping my friends and people that I know make that transition, because as I went through the process, and I alluded to in my earlier segment, there was a lot of mistakes that I made, and I didn't go about things the way I probably should have if I had studied it more. And as a result of those mistakes, it was costly in terms of time and frustration and disappointment for sure. So realize after having made that transition a couple of times in the corporate world, and learning about all this stuff, it interested me more, and I began to just, help my friends with their resumes, help them with LinkedIn profiles, guide them on how to job hunt, guide them on interviewing, what to expect, all the things that you don't know, right? That's the area I like to operate in, because if you don't know it. You can't do anything about it. You can't take any action with it. So again, I just started to do that, and I did that for a number of years, and then I'm contemplating ending my full 9-to-5 job, and I'm thinking about what comes next, and I say, hey, why don't I parlay this into a secondary type of a business, which is a little bit fearful, for me to begin with, because I never operated a business before, but you have to take the business with what you're doing to help people and do them together both well. So I said to myself, there's a need for this. I started to look around, and I saw there wasn't a lot of entities out there that were providing this kind of transition advice to law enforcement and military. And I kind of view law enforcement and military in kind of parallel terms, because they face a lot of the same challenges. And there's the same amount of transition, a great deal of transition required to go from government, whether it be military or law enforcement, into the private sector. Again, the things that they don't know about working in the private sector. So I toiled on a name, came up with a name, a logo, all the things that I thought were important that really aren't very important, but to try and build up, the knowledge base and work with people and provide value to them. And once I got to the point where I feel that I was worthy of someone paying me for my services, and began to offer that at a reasonable rate, I believe, to police and law enforcement, I created a business, and it's quite a journey, but it affords me a great deal of opportunity to share to put more of me in the world out there in terms of my knowledge and experience, and to help other people not make the same mistakes that I made. Because if you've been on the job for 25 or 30 years, or you've been in the military for a long time, when was the last time you ever wrote a resume? When was the last time you had to look for a job? When was the last time you went on an interview? So there was a big learning curve, and that landscape has changed dramatically and continues to evolve dramatically as time goes on. So there was a big learning curve there, and again, not a lot of people out there doing it.
No, so, and my sense of urgency has been that what happened, 30 years ago, we had the Reagan era, all this hiring around the war on drugs, right? Because of the Reagan era. And that led into the 90s, and there was a bit of a hiring slowdown. But September 11th happens. We have a huge hiring for our law enforcement partners after September 11th. So what are we coming up on this year but the 20th anniversary of 9/11? And sure enough, that means there's going to be a lot of people over the next 5 or 10 years that are hitting that retirement age, or they're hitting that retirement timing grade, that are going to be looking for, okay, I can't retire, but where do I go? I'm still too young to hang it up and go fishing or go play golf all day. But what am I going to do? How am I going to stay and give back to society and stay busy? So my sense of urgency, similar to yours, is there's just nobody out there having those conversations who's been on this side of the table. There's plenty of resume writers, and I know that's a business, and and I wish them the best in helping people develop their resumes. But I've heard from, probably like what we've talked about before, we've heard from chiefs of police who will pay $1,500 to have a resume rewritten, and it's rewritten by somebody who's really good at writing the English language, but they never pushed a patrol car, they never served in the military a day in their life, and they just don't understand what we're trying to do. And I would argue that they've never been on the security or investigation side of the table either. And so I think that's the value that you bring absolutely here. And I also respectfully, I think, Steve, the East Coast experience in law enforcement is way different than the Midwest and different than the West Coast experience, which in my mind translates to the transition will feel different. And so, kudos to you for digging in there and developing this company and going out there and reaching out and helping people. But there's just something interesting that we kind of talked about off camera. This 80-20 rule, and I'm messing it up probably already, but help us understand. And it kind of doesn't matter if it's putting time and energy into looking for a job or actually doing a job. There's a great metric that you have that I want you to share with everybody that I think it can be enlightening on how we kind of go about our daily work now here too.
Yeah, sure, Scott. There's a principle called the 80-20 rule, and it was developed hundreds of years ago, and it applies to sets of data in a way that you wouldn't expect. So, in instance, if you put like 50% effort into something, you would have expected to produce so much results, and if you doubled your effort, the results would double. But that's not exactly the case. So, the 80-20 rule goes under the principle that, for instance, at your job, you spend 80% of your results will come from actually what you do in 20% of your time. And working harder or working longer doesn't necessarily equate to that same return on your effort. They say 80% of a business, 80% of the profit in a business comes from 20% of its customers. 80% of the profit in a business comes from 20% of the products it sells. It's on and on the applications. But where I like to stress it with my clients is that I, generally speaking, people, and myself included, back in the day when I was looking for jobs, I spent 80% of my time doing something that in an area that would only return results 20%. For instance, right now, people think that applying to posted jobs online and through job boards is the way to go. In actuality, only 20% of all positions come from posted job opportunities, and 80% come from what we call the hidden job market, networking, pulling jobs to you instead of pushing yourself towards jobs, non-conventional methods of getting jobs or getting yourself considered for jobs, even in cases where there's no job posted. How great would that be? You have a company looking for you and you're not in competition with anybody. But generally speaking, most people will spend 80% of the time on that 20% return, and it just doesn't make sense if they knew that. It should be completely the opposite. Maybe you should spend 20% of your time posting to job openings online and devoting the 80% of your time to other non-conventional methods, which is the way that companies hire, through networks, through recommendations, through referrals. That's the way to get jobs today. It's a real long shot. If you put your resume, you send it into Indeed.com.
And we've talked about resume building and that kind of stuff. And so put more effort into developing your network and looking for maybe, I don't know, coffee type meetings or coffee type recruiting events. Is that what you're suggesting too?
Well, any way you can build your network is beneficial. But again, continue to think about the 80-20 rule. If how can I build my network as fast as possible with as little effort as possible? So places like LinkedIn is where you want to is where you want to go. You want to start to look for people that work in industries where you're considering working, or you want to work, or in companies where you're considering wanting to work, and you develop, connect with them, and you have what we call, you try and have an informational interview where you're just showing an interest in what they do, how they got there, what were their obstacles, what would they suggest. The mistake that people make is make these connections and they asking for help getting a job, and that's the last thing you want to do. I mean, I don't even know you when you're asking me to get a job, right?
Right.
So you need to walk. You need to walk before you run. So you set up that informational interview. You have that conversation. You inquire about what they know and what they've experienced. You share what you're up to, and you, with the expectation or hope, let's say, that they buy into what you're up to and they offer their help to you. That's the way it should naturally come about. You shouldn't be asking that for them. You should have the relationship develop to a point where they're willing to help you. Once they, and you need to keep them up to date what you're up to. I'm looking for this. I'm going to school for that, and just keep them aware so that they're aware now. If they come across something, hey, Steve said he was interested in that. That might be something that I could help him with and be beneficial for him. People who work in corporate industry can make a couple $1,000 referring somebody who goes to work for that company and gets hired. But they're not going to do that, not going to put their name on it, nor would I put my name on anybody who I think is not either passionate about it or skilled at it, or has just been asking me for a job. I have to know that person, before I do that.
How do you, when you're working with people who are coming out of many, many decades in law enforcement, how do you get them in the mindset to have that energy and to have that drive and have that desire to really change the way they think? How do you work with them on that?
Well, I guess it has to start with them finding something that they're passionate about and them setting the goals for what they want to do. I mean, you need to be going towards something instead of running away from something. So I can't necessarily instill that with them if it's something that they're not going to be passionate about, that they haven't set up goals to wanting to do. They gotta want to do it themselves, and then you can instill the motivation by and the passion by educating them on how best to go about it, so it doesn't become frustrating, so it doesn't become discouraging. So and to realize, hey, as an 18-year-old kid, you were able to tool yourself so that by the age of 24, 25, you could do anything you want. If you want to be a doctor and you wanted to be a lawyer, if you wanted to be a cop,
Right.
you wanted to be an investigator, 18-year-old kids are starting to do that and develop, so if they can put that together in a couple of years, there's no reason why any of us who want to transition, whether it be something similar or something completely different, can't develop that same strategy, have that goal. You got to have with any journey, you got to have a navigation system to help you. You can't just wing it and trial and error. Because the tendency with people, I find, when they get discouraged, when they apply and they're not getting anywhere, they're not making progress, they tend to want to accept something that's less than what they sought out to get, something that they want to settle for, and that's not a way to go. You don't deserve to settle for anything after you spent your life devoted to your service of your country and people of this country. You deserve to get what you want when you want it. But you've got to realize, anybody can do it. If you want to retool, if you have, we may be in our 40s, 50s but I feel I have as much energy as anybody else and ever did, because I'm passionate about it. That's what drives the energy, man, the motivation and seeing the results
And you
from
can
it.
upskill. You can learn new skills. I don't understand why people go, I don't use the computer much to do anything because I don't understand how it works. You can learn. We were just talking about YouTube. You can learn anything. Go watch YouTube.
Like I said, if an 18-year-old can learn to become a doctor, could become a lawyer, can become anything they want, why couldn't we? As long as we start thinking about it and give ourselves the time to do it and go through the steps necessary to bridge that gap, anything's possible.
And you're very much needed out here in the private sector. I've always said the world is only getting more dangerous, and that skill, the mentality, all of the hard and soft skills that our law enforcement partners bring to the table are going to be needed in the private sector more than ever. What's the last thing or that one bit of information that you would want to impart on somebody who's considering transition to the private sector?
I would consider starting to think about it as early as you can. Um, Try and find out what you're passionate about, what you're best suited for. Set a plan in motion, establish goals with some milestones, and just, because we tend to procrastinate if we don't do that. If we got to hold ourselves accountable for that. So if we want to do this and we want to do that by this date and want to accomplish this by that date, so that we can make that journey with some sense of priority and organization and efficiency. And if you need help, there's people like me who are willing to help you identify what you're most passionate about, help you make out the resume that will help you become noticed and get interviews, guide you on all the nuances of interviewing and job hunting and salary negotiation and how to succeed and advance in the corporate world. I mean, interviewing, for instance, is just terrifying. That's the thing that people get derives the most concern, the most anxiety. What are they going to ask me? How do I deal with these issues in my past? How do I answer that? I get it. I mean, I've been there and done that. So don't be afraid. You don't have to do it all on your own. There's people who can
Don't go
help
it
you
alone.
and guide you so that you do it more efficiently, more effectively, with less stress. I mean, it can be a really stressful process, going through all this.
Yeah, I think having that knowledge and having somebody who's on your side that doesn't have, there's no agenda here other than we want you to be successful. So connecting with guys like us or folks like us, there are women out there too that are really helpful in transition. So doing that, having a great network, those are also really important. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. And the distinction I'll make again is, you want to go to somebody. I'm not saying you have to go to me, but you want to go to somebody
Yeah.
who's been there, who's been in your shoes, who knows what skills you developed during the course of your job, who's made the transition successfully, who knows what it's like what's required to succeed and advance in the corporate world. Take advice from someone who's been there and done that, whether it be me or anybody else, but that's who you want to go to, someone who's got both sides of the equation down, the government experience and the corporate experience.
Yeah, I think that's really important because they've been in on both sides of the table. Yeah, thanks, Steve. Great
My
stuff.
pleasure.
Like Steve
Thank you.
said, don't go it alone. We're here to help you. We want you to be successful, and we want you to be happy because if you're not happy, then your client or your customers or your business that you're working in isn't going to be happy with you. So we want you to figure out what are your priorities, what do you want to do, what are you passionate about. All this, just to reiterate all the great things Steve was saying. So thanks for following along, and Steve,
My
it's been
pleasure.
great having you.
Good
I
luck,
appreciate you
everybody.
talking.
Be
Yeah, good
safe.
luck
Be
out there.
safe,
Be
everyone.
safe. Yeah, thanks, Steve.
And you can do it. You can make that transition. Take care.
Yeah, we did it.
We did it.
We did it. You can do it too.
We can do it.